Welcome to another edition of 1 in 15. As ever, I'm going to get my guests to introduce themselves.
Good morning. Hi, Andy. So I'm Kate Hesk. I'm co-founder of an organisation called Cognomie. We're a global organisation with a focus on mental fitness. So developing and supporting mental fitness, but also measuring it for individuals and organisations.
Brilliant. It's great to have you today, Kate. It's really appreciate you taking the time. As you know, the purpose of this is we're getting people to think about one big thing that's kind of dominating their thinking at the moment. What's your one big thing?
So we do a lot of work around mental fitness, as I mentioned. The one thing that's really standing out to me and becoming a slight obsession right now, I have to admit, is the term work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating right now to see the data that we're collecting around people's response to how they feel their work-life balance is. But actually, to me, more interesting than that is the response that we're getting to the term work-life balance. I'm finding it really interesting.
Okay, so tell me more about that, the response you're getting to the term work-life balance.
Yeah. So one of the things we do at Cognomie is we survey and capture data around different aspects of mental fitness. So we have some foundation elements that we create data for individuals to understand their mental fitness better, but also for organizations to track their mental fitness over time. One of those foundations has the title work-life balance. What we're noticing right now is that more than 80%, so about 85% of people that complete our surveys and generate reports around their mental fitness are saying that they want an improvement in work-life balance.
Right.
On the surface, that sounds quite obvious, perhaps, right now with the pandemic situation. When we go into organizations or start to speak to individuals about that aspect, I'm really struck with how many people are saying, I don't like that term. That term, it doesn't work for me. What is work-life balance?
Sure.
And so the fascination for me and the slight obsession is how we can get beneath that and help people recognize that, maybe traditionally we thought about this balance of work and life, two separate parts of us. But actually, we need to recognize that we are one individual, we're one person, a whole person. And so to think about these as two separate aspects is quite interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe more related to time than balance. So I'd love to explore that further with you.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm reminded of discussions in some kind of religious circles, funny enough, about how the Greeks separated kind of spirit and body, and that's where we get this idea of soul and the kind of the otherness of us. But actually, a lot of the major religions historically hold that it's much more blended than that everything is affected by everything else. And that is that thing, you're right, with the work-life balance is like, well, where does it start? When we did the traditional 9-to-5 roles, then we knew when we were at work, we were working, when we were at home, we were doing whatever life was. And I guess particularly in a pandemic with more people than ever working from home or not working from home and struggling with that, that kind of blending of where do I start, which hat am I wearing at any individual time? I can see why people struggle with that term perhaps more now than ever before.
Yeah, and so it becomes a recognition that they aren't two separate things, and they're not kind of separated as they maybe previously could be considered to be. But there's an absolute overlap, and the two become one, if you like. So the sense, as you say, people now working in their home environment, the two are overlapped. So managing that in their own balance, it becomes more and more important. Whereas previously, and a number of clients I've spoken to would say that I managed it previously because at the end of the working day, I'd go to the gym on my way home, have a commute on my way home. So time was managed in a different way. So that external perspective on balance was kind of, we were helped to do that effectively. But now with it all overlapping and merging for many people, and of course people are going through transitions right now into and out of that space, the interest for me is that people need to start to look more introspectively, to focus on, how am I managing my personal balance? How am I managing my energy, my focus, my motivation personally? And what can I do about that? Rather than thinking this is an external contributor, it's somebody else's responsibility to help me with my work-life balance.
Yeah, I see that. I guess again, I'm starting to spark thoughts about boundary management in that, you know, but the boundary that a commute gives you, for example, it might not be your decision wholly. And one of the things I used to do when I worked from home quite a lot was I used to go for a commute, even though I was starting and finishing in the same place. I would go for a, you know, quick walk around the block to try and get my mindset into, right, well, I'm not a father at the moment. Well, I still am, but my main function is to do whatever the job is, and then to have a commute home, and again, even if it's just around the block. And you're right, it's that time management, that trying to work out who we are at any one given time is so much harder, or has been so much harder in the last half a year, perhaps, for a lot of people.
Definitely. And all of that's coming a bit closer into kind of the personal perspective, isn't it? So, you know, the hat I wear, the how I manage my personal time and use that time myself. And then a further perspective is around perspective. So, you know, how do I see myself? Where's my identity? Where's my meaning in this moment? And how do I know myself well enough to know how I manage my own energy? So it really comes down to self-awareness as a primary consideration. What do I need in a particular moment to feel balanced? So a recognition, and I see why people react against work-life balance, because there's this real awareness that actually this is about me. This is not about, you know, something external. This is very much internal to myself and my own self-awareness and consideration.
Yeah. And do you think from those kind of anecdotal conversations you've had, do you think guilt plays a part in that? Do you think people, I know I've had conversations before with people who feel like that, you know, when they say, oh, I don't feel like I'm in balance, what they really mean is perhaps, I feel like I'm not able to fully be myself or fully function or offer myself in any situations. Do you think that's playing a part?
Definitely. And so in there's a consideration around what the individual wants to be or offer, and there's also what's required of them or requested of them externally. And that absolutely is coming out. We have a lot of conversations around guilt playing out because people are being drawn to do things that might feel like they're not right for them in that moment. And another perspective that's emerging as you said, as people are going back to the office perhaps, or not going back to the office and wanting to go back to the office, there's this whole piece around actually people having more choice in one way. So I spoke to an organisation earlier in the week where people were given the choice. If they want to go back to the office, that's fine. And there's a huge potential for guilt there. There's an individual thinking, well, should I go back to the office? Is it right for the family? Is it right for me? So helping people into a space of really thinking about their own meaning, focusing on their own self-compassion and self-care and what's important to them, as well as what's needed of them externally, is a great place to start. So really being very introspective in that consideration around balance, meaning, perspective, fulfillment and motivation for an individual.
So tell me a little bit more about the work that you might then do. If you were chatting to an organisation or a company and this kind of question of work-life balance, with all the caveats about how great language that is, the question comes up and people are struggling with it, maybe not fully able to articulate where that struggle is coming from. What might you be able to do to help them think that through?
Yeah. So I think we'd stick with the term work-life balance because the great thing about it is it's provocative, if evidently. So it gets people talking, and that's ultimately what we can do. So whether it's a conversation with themselves, so generating self-awareness by digging a bit more under the surface, reflecting on, you know, what does it mean for me? Where am I now? Where do I want to be and what's contributing to that? So whether that's an internal conversation that someone has that we can support with some resources to help them think differently, but ideally get them to talk to somebody else. So a thinking partner, a coach, a practitioner, a mentor, someone internal or external that can help them dig under the surface of what's really going on underneath this. I haven't got a good work-life balance. Let's explore it further. Let's generate some self-awareness around it to then choose what can I do about that. So what's within my control, what's limiting me, what's serving me, and what's the action I can take here. So presenting them with choice. So the use of a coach, working with a coach or thinking partner to enable that at the individual level, and then creating the opportunity, facilitating the opportunity for people to talk about this across teams, across groups, across organizations, bringing it into the language, getting people to talk about it, and have the conversations, and we can facilitate those for them. But the most important thing is that people are starting to talk about, what is it that I need around this? What's within my control, and whose support can I enlist?
Yeah, that's really interesting, because again, it's not really struck me in this way before, but of course it's individual. Of course, my work-life balance and getting that right is going to be different to yours, is going to be different to other colleagues.
Yeah.
And having that conversation so that we're both aware ourselves what that balance might look like and how we might get it or find it, recognize it when we get there, but also recognizing and appreciating other people's productivity issues, guilt issues, all the other things coming in, about how they might articulate work-life balance might be different to us.
Definitely. And often it can require a bit of courage. You might need to step out there and request something, or challenge something, or say, this isn't going to work for me because, or I need this because. So having someone help you build that courage can also be very useful. And so making space for it, recognizing it's important, is an organizational requirement, I would say. So, being open to the possibility of individuals finding ways of voicing what they need, and then supporting that as much as is possible, within the constraints, of course, of needing to perform as a business, as an organization.
And other than people needing courage and being able, being given permission to talk about it, are there any other kind of key risks you see for organizations creating that culture of honesty and reflection?
Risks, interesting. I don't see risks, actually. I see potential. It might sound a bit trite, but I really see that possibility to help people feel more motivated, engaged, energized, by being able to get more of what they need and want. A lot of people are saying that right now is a great opportunity for people to refocus on what's important to them, and so organizations being open to that, I only see as a good thing, to help people feel more engaged, loyal, productive, and performing at their best. It might mean that they need to step into a difficult conversation. So I suppose there's a risk there. It's about the potential for challenge, and how to manage that challenge in an effective way that people feel good about it at the end of the day. But preparing for those conversations, being mindful about the conversations, reflecting, giving it space, is absolutely the first step for that. So it does require people to pause for a bit and step into a new space very often.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I think, like others have said, actually, in some of the other conversations, there's a real sense that for all the trauma and all the ongoing, and we know that there'll be other kind of changes forced upon us. There's announcements just this morning about what's going to happen. But if we're able to get into the mindset of looking at this as an opportunity, not pretending that the challenges aren't there, but nonetheless kind of going, well, what can we have as a result of this, of taking this time enforced upon us as it was, to rethink how things doing. Lots of people coming out of working from home going, I can see some advantages in here perhaps that I never had, or different work patterns, or different even shift patterns. Really interesting. And it really, I'm really excited for some organisations. I think they've got real potential to see things coming new. What else about the work-life balance is kind of important at the moment, do you think, that people are going to be thinking about?
I think as people return to the office, that's, I know that's not everybody, but as people are returning to the office, it's how to manage that. I touched on it earlier. It's how people are going to get used to being in that space again, because the space is different.
Sure.
Very often now, there'll be fewer people in the size of space, more separated. So helping people think about how they manage their social interaction appropriately might need some thinking about, and paying attention to, and being mindful of and supportive of. And then there are those who are working at home that would rather be in the office but haven't been given the opportunity.
Sure.
Those that are in the office that would rather be at home. So again, it's a whole transition for so many people. And again, I know that's only one subset of the whole population, but that's what occurs to me as you ask that question. So how we support that for individuals, as you say, individuals to take responsibility for how they're going to manage that. And from an organizational perspective, giving space for that acknowledging it's there, being appreciative of it, and then accepting that that's something that people may need some support with, and whether that's external support or whether that's, you know, peer support or support from a manager. It all starts, as far as I can see, with a conversation. So creating that space and safety for people to talk about how they're feeling, what they're thinking, and how that's working for them.
That's great. I mean, we're coming to the end of our time. So I guess, and we've peppered the conversation with kind of hope and possibility, which is kind of my caveat for all my guests. One last thing, really, I guess, Kate, is if somebody's listening to this and they're thinking, there's something about work-life balance for me at the moment that isn't right, I'm not quite sure where to start. I think you've maybe started to answer this, or you have started to answer this already, but what advice what could they do today? What could they plan to do in the next couple of days?
Yeah, so I guess two things, one quite practical and one slightly more challenging often for people. There's clearly something about managing time. So, you know, prioritizing, going back to all the great theories around time management. So mapping out priorities and in time, I think that's one thing. So, and bringing that down to a very small level. So for the day, even for the hour, how are you going to use your time? So just being rigid about that, or strict with yourself about that. But in order to do that, and then the next step, I think, is to create space within ourselves. So I will use the term mindfulness, perhaps with a small m, because that becomes overused and people sometimes react against that. But for me, that means being present in the moment, being truly engaged in thinking and presence in the moment. And the value of that is, if we pause for a minute and if we create space, then we can start to think differently. We can start to be more creative. We can become more aware of what's working for us and what isn't. And then we can choose to put some new things into place. But it does require us to stop for a minute and pause. So that's something I think I would recommend for individuals to work with.
That's brilliant. And I guess the second part is something that you can plan into by doing and things. We are bang out of time. Kate, you've been a fantastic guest. Really got me thinking about lots of other things, about, you know, maybe some decisions I need to make for my own balance or what have you. But thank you, Kate Hesk, for your time today.
Thanks, Andy.